Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting for Monday, June 5th, 2017. My name is Mark Farrell. I'll be chairing this committee. I am joined by our committee vice chair, Supervisor Aaron Peskin, as well as Supervisor Katie Tang. I would like to thank Samuel Williams and Charles Kremenak from SFGTV for covering the meeting today, as well as Elisa Samara, the clerk of our committee. Madam Clerk, do we have any announcements?
Yes, please make sure to silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the June 13th Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Would you call item number one?
Item number one is a resolution approving and authorizing an agreement for the conveyance of a parcel of real estate located at 2070 Bryant Street to the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, authorizing the Director of Property to execute documents and making appropriate findings.
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, if there are any questions, we have staff here on hand, but otherwise we've received a request from the department to continue this item for 1 week. Or for our next regularly scheduled meeting. So with that, could we take public comment on item number one first? Anybody wish to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. Colleagues, if no objections, can I entertain a motion to continue this item till our next next land use committee meeting?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Tang. We could take that without objection. Madam Clerk, actually, hold on a second. I just received notice. We've been asked to hold off on item number 2. So if we could go to item number 3 first, please.
Item number 3 is a resolution authorizing the placement of 13 street plaques commemorating historical landmarks in the top of Broadway Community Benefit District and accepting the plaques as gifts.
Okay, thank you very much. This item was sponsored by Supervisor Peskin, so we'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Chair Farrell and Supervisor Tang. I'm very pleased to bring this resolution which would authorize the placement, it says of 13, but I'm going to amend it to 10 street plaques commemorating historical landmarks in the Broadway North Beach area. This is brought to us by the top of Broadway Community Benefit District and would commemorate a number of remarkable pieces of history and edifices ranging from the Italian-American Bank, which is at 270 Columbus Avenue, which is where lending happened after the 1906 earthquake for the rebuilding of North Beach and that part of San Francisco, to San Francisco's earliest gay bars that found their roots in the Barbary Coast, as well as the Jazz Workshop, and the home of the first organized adult entertainment venue in San Francisco, the Lusty Lady, to name a few. I'm very pleased that the Community Benefit District has brought this forward and will be paying for it at their own expense. And colleagues, I will pass around a resolution which changes the 13 plaques to 10, as there were a number of locations where the CBD was not able to obtain approval yet from local property owners, including, unfortunately, at this time, the old Mabuhay Gardens at 443 Broadway Street, where Iggy Pop, Patti Smith, Devo, Blondie, and the Ramones all played. This also commemorates an incredible San Francisco jeweler and artist, Peter Macchiarini, that we named the 1100 block of Kearny Street steps for, who was one of the foremost jewelers and who actually fabricated the wedding ring that is on my finger. And with that, I will pass these amendments to you and open it up for public comment. We have Dominic Lamondre, the Executive Director of the Community Benefit District, here with us today.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Please come on up.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. As Aaron alluded to, the original plaque project was 13, but due to certain property owners' revocation of their original letters of support due to reasons unrelated with the historical marker project, that has been reduced to 10. But we still think that with those 10 plaques, we encapsulate the cultural and historical legacy of the North Beach corridor at the intersection of Broadway and Columbus.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Colleagues, any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to public comment. Anybody wish to comment on item number 2? Item number 3. Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. Supervisor Peskin.
Yeah, I hope that there will be one more plaque for Carol Doda that comes along one of these days. And with that, I would like to move the amendments that are before you and send this as amended to the full board with recommendation.
Motion by Supervisor Peskin, and we can take that without objection. Madam Clerk, would you go back and call item number 2, please?
Item number 2 is a resolution establishing the Compton's Transgender Cultural District with the intent of commemorating historical sites, preserving existing spaces, and planning for vibrant communities that are transgender, gender variant, intersex, lesbian, gay, and bisexual affirming.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, this item was sponsored by Supervisor Kim, so she is joining us right now, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Chair Farrell, for hearing this item. Colleagues, today I am here asking for your support of the Compton's Transgender Cultural District, named after one of the first recorded transgender riots in history, preceding Stonewall as a milestone in our LGBT movement and history. The Lower Tenderloin has historically been a vibrant and diverse neighborhood, an important location that intersects with her story of countless communities. Today, we are here to talk about the TLGB history and community, and in particular, the transgender history of the hard-fought struggle for civil rights rooted deep in our Tenderloin community and neighborhood. An often underappreciated but truly defining moment for the transgender rights movement in the U.S. took place over 50 years ago when at Compton's cafeteria, a space where trans women would congregate, a riot broke out in response to police harassment and arrests against the trans customers at the cafeteria simply for being themselves. Eventually, this community decided enough was enough, and as historian Susan Stryker said in her must-see documentary, The Screaming Queens, quote, Compton's was the debut of the transgender community onto the American political stage. Led by trans women and involving many local youth from the first known gay youth organization Vanguard, a project of Glide Memorial, the riot kicked off a long overdue human rights movement. Turk and Taylor and the surrounding area has long been a space for trans, non-binary, and LGBT people congregated. Esser hotels, like the Rosa, were often one of the few places where trans non-binary residents were allowed to even rent a room. Last year, the city renamed a portion of Turk and Taylor Street to Compton's Cafeteria Way, and the year before, we named the 100 block of Turk Vicky Marlane. Our hope is that this intersection, the site of the original Compton's Cafeteria, will be the center now of a new Compton's district, serving as a hub for trans-inclusive job development, businesses, arts, education, and historical preservation. By creating the Compton's TLGB district, we are sending a message to the world that not only are trans people welcome here in San Francisco, we are proactively creating a space dedicated to encouraging a vibrant living community. This will be the first cultural district to honor our legacy of our trans community and the leadership and activism here in San Francisco. I look forward to working with our community leaders as well as departments, including Planning, OEWD, Arts Commission, MOHCD, so that we can collectively build this cultural district. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the tireless work of many of our community leaders and organizations. I'd like to first recognize the Compton's District Coalition and Honey Mahogany for your invaluable contribution for making this project happen, as well as the Legacy Business Coalition, the TGI Justice Project, Janetta Johnson, the Q Foundation, the Legacy Business Coalition, St. James Infirmary, Stephanie Ashley, Shane Watson, Donna Graves, Susan Stryker, and last but not least of all, the Tenderloin Trailblazers of the TLGB movement, whose civil rights work has been marginalized and minimalized over the past few decades, but hopefully no longer. So, colleagues, I do have a series of amendments that I'd like to introduce, but I'd like to do that after public comment. And so if there are no comments or questions from the committee, I just ask Chair if we can open up for public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you very much, Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, if no other questions or comments, we will open this up to public comment. Anybody wish to comment on item number 2, please come on up. Everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. Please line up against the far wall if you're not first. And
hey, Jordan, come up.
I'll just come up here. So, Good afternoon. Jordan Davis speaking for myself as a TL resident. I support the enactment of this transgender cultural district in the Tenderloin, though I am not quite keen on hearing the name of the racist, sexist, transphobic proprietor of the cafe that created the conditions for this riot to happen. I also want to say that if we're going to have a transgender district, it should never turn into the Castro, where your acceptance in that so-called rainbow community is judged by the amount of green you have, and where if you're poor and trans or queer, you feel not welcome. I don't feel welcome there. What the Transgender Cultural District needs most is deeply affordable housing and services. Even here in San Francisco, transgender people tend to be poorer, and we are disproportionately affected by the housing crisis, so much so that elected officials get booed when they try to speak at our events. Let this Transgender Cultural District not become an artificial Disneyland or Cisneyland where people walk on blue, pink, and white crosswalks with a $20 kale cucumber smoothie in hand, while trans people can't afford to live here. Let's make this meaningful for trans people, especially those of color, disabled, immigrant, poor, etc. Please pass this.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Honey Mahogany, and I am one of the lead community organizers for the Compton's Cultural Transgender District. Thank you so much for hearing us today. I just want to express my gratitude to the board for, well, hopefully your approval of this district. I think that it's important to note that there have been a lot of community organizations involved in the creation of the district, including TGIJP, St. James, and the Q Foundation. And we've been working on this for a long time with a lot of passion, and it is truly a community-run effort. And while we definitely seek out and would like to see the support of the city government, we would also like to be heavily involved in the process that creates and establishes the district as it is. I want to ensure that we are also being aware of including the voices of people of color specifically in the district, as people of color are continually being pushed out of the Tenderloin, as well as the trans community that has existed there for so long and felt and made the Tenderloin its home. So again, thank you for your approval of this district.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Arguello. I'm the chair for Calle 24 Latino Cultural District, and we are here in full support of the Compton's Transgender Cultural District. It's an important first step in acknowledging the transgenders' contributions to the Tenderloin and to San Francisco as a whole. And it's also important to have a place to preserve affordable housing, a gathering space, and jobs as it's related to the transgender community. So please support this cultural district. Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Moises Garcia. I'm the corridor manager for the Calle 24 Latino Cultural District and the co-chair of the Economic Development Committee for the LGBTQ Planning Committee led by the Planning Department. Just want to speak in full support of the creation of this district. We're obviously Calle 24 is in full support of this legislation, and we look forward to working very closely with the transgender community in the creation of their district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Janetta Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of TGIJP, which stands for Transgender Gender Variant Intersex Justice Project. And I'm in support of this Transgender Cultural District because it'll give us an opportunity to actually own something within this city that's led by us. It'll also give us an opportunity to create economic justice and some type of housing situations. And it also gives us an opportunity to create a safe district where transgender people can get their needs met. I mean, there's lots of talk about, creating a reentry program within the district so that transgender people can have equal, adequate employment opportunities and feel safe around that. So please consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Scott Chilberg. I'm a city planning student and have worked in the Tenderloin neighborhood for several years, and I just wanted to express my support for this district. I think it's incredibly important to recognize the importance of the Tenderloin neighborhood in trans and queer history in San Francisco, and I think this district is a really incredible opportunity to preserve some of the spaces within that district. So I wanted to express my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Tim Fry, Historic Preservation Officer for the San Francisco Planning Department. I wanted to voice the Planning Department's support of the proposed resolution. As you know, we are working and engaging the community, LGBTQ community, on a broader citywide cultural heritage strategy. Naturally, cultural districts come out of those strategies, but it certainly, with all of the good work that the Comptons group has done, there's no reason to postpone or wait until the strategy is completed to get work on the district underway. We want to make sure, and as you will see in the resolution, we want to make sure that both the working group for Comptons and the broader working group for the LGBTQ cultural heritage strategy support each other and are working together to ensure that the most vulnerable communities within the LGBTQ community and the TGIL LGBTQ community are represented. So anything we can do to help move this along, we would certainly be in support of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to comment on item number 2? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. So I do want to thank the Planning Department for being here today. Sorry, you didn't have to speak at public comment. We could have had you speak later. But thank you for your support, but also for working with our community leaders. And again, I just want to give a big shout out to the community leaders who brought this concept to our office and has been working with us every step of the way to develop a very different type of cultural district that is not just about the history, but really about how we support, activate, and energize the living trans community here in the Tenderloin and Mid-Market area. So thank you so much for working with us and bringing this to our office. I'm so excited to be a part of the team that's going to make this the first transgender district in the country. So I do have a series of amendments that I want to provide to the Land Use Committee, and we also have one set of amendments from the clerk's office as well, which I am happy to accept. And so we do have copies that Barbara Lopez will be distributing. The technical amendment from the clerk's office just clarifies that this is not a department working group, and the Board of Supervisors does not appoint its members, but that if it does turn into one, that it will be an advisory body subject to the requirements of the Sunshine Ordinance of the Brown Act. So that's just a clarification amendment for this, and then the series of amendments are before the Land Use Committee today.
Okay, colleagues, any questions or comments?
I just want to note that this is on the same day that we authorized a plaque about the history of Finocchios.
Duly noted. Okay, colleagues, we have some amendments in front of us then. Unless there are any questions or comments, perhaps a motion to accept the amendments and pass the underlying item through as amended with a positive recommendation. Motion by Supervisor Peskin.
Moved.
Okay, wonderful. Motion by Supervisor Peskin then. We can take that without objection. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, colleagues.
Madam Clerk, would you call item 4, please?
Item number 4 is a resolution authorizing the Department of Real Estate to subdivide 530 Sansome Street and convey the air rights to the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development for developing affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. This item was also sponsored by Supervisor Peskin. So was the next one, by the way. I'll turn it over to you, Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Chair Farrell. This is an idea that I've actually been pursuing for getting on to a decade and a half. At 530 Sansome Street in downtown San Francisco is our high-pressure fire station number 13, which is a non-historic building that was built, I believe, in 1976. Is about 30 feet high, slab concrete in an area that is zoned 200 feet. And I've had a dream that we could utilize the air parcel above the fire station for affordable housing in some shape, manner, or form. The resolution that is before you contemplates building affordable housing on top of the fire station, a notion that has actually been undertaken in other American cities, including our nation's capital. But in conversations with the Mayor's Office of Housing, other alternatives could include building market rate housing and using the proceeds to build affordable housing in other locations in the northeast corner of town. This is part and parcel of a number of actions that the city has undertaken in District 3, ranging from the old Embarcadero Freeway parcels at Broadway and Battery, Broadway and Sansom, and now at Broadway and Front Street, to build affordable housing, as well as work that we did at the old International Hotel site some 15 years ago. I want District 3 to do its part for affordable housing. 2 weeks ago, the Board of Supervisors approved, thank you colleagues, the purchase of a property in Chinatown, which we are land banking and eventually will build some 60 units of affordable housing on. This could be an opportunity to fund that. I am very appreciative of the fire department and the mayor's office and our Department of Real Estate's cooperation in this matter, and hope that we could move forward with some form or fashion of authorizing the air rights to be used for affordable housing, either directly on site or monetizing that parcel and using the proceeds for off-site affordable housing nearby. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Hartley from the Mayor's Office of Housing.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Kate Hartley, Acting Director of the Mayor's Office of Housing. We do support this measure. We have looked at the site and generally believe the obvious, which is that using air rights parcels is a great way to add to affordable housing and housing in the city. At a 200-foot height level, the cost of building 100% affordable housing development there is prohibitive, so we would be very desirous of seeing that site developed and using the proceeds from a market rate development to, for example, build out or accelerate the building out of 772 Pacific. So we think this is a great idea and would love to see those funds come in quickly.
So, Ms. Hartley, as I originally introduced this, it contemplated, and the resolution before us, which authorizes the Department of Real Estate to subdivide the air rights parcel, the subject resolution contemplates affordable housing atop the fire station number 13. I assume we should amend this slightly to say, for the purpose of developing affordable housing atop the fire station or using the proceeds from said development for nearby affordable housing.
Yes, I think that's an appropriate amendment.
And I also want to acknowledge Chief Hayes White and Deputy Chief Tony Rivera and staff from the fire department. Obviously, if this project were to proceed, we would have to temporarily relocate the apparatus from Station 13 to nearby stations, be it Station 2, 28, 41, or other stations in the area during the construction period at that parcel. Chief Rivera, would you like to say anything on behalf of the fire department?
Good afternoon, supervisors. Excuse me. My name's Assistant Deputy Chief Tony Rivera, and I just wanted to say on behalf of the San Francisco Fire Department, we completely support affordable housing, and we commit to work collaboratively with the mayor's office and any other departments to try to see something come to fruition of this plan.
Thank you, Assistant Chief. And from the Department of Real Estate, Mr. Updike, anything you'd like to add?
John Updike, Director of Real Estate. Thank you, Supervisor. Just two things. we would endeavor to review the feasibility and the logistics of temporary relocation of the station, as well as development of the site and what kind of unit count we're looking at here. And then as we get more mature along that process and are ready to issue some sort of request, we would then check back in, make sure we're aligned on our goals, and then go to market and see what the market would have to say. In the interim, we can probably either jurisdictionally transfer the air rights to real estate in order to effectuate this process ahead, or that could wait until the time when we have an actual agreement, and then we can simultaneously move the property about to facilitate a sale.
So, Mr. Updike, would you like the subject resolution, which already requests a feasibility study with regard to the development of housing, would you like it to be amended to also authorize the feasibility of temporary relocation of the apparatus?
I think that would be great.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if there's any public comment, I'd like to get it at this time.
So first we have our colleague, Supervisor Tang. Turn over her.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin, for thinking very creatively about providing affordable housing, especially in your district, and the speed at which you're doing it. I do applaud you for that. I just had a question about, obviously the resolution before us is the subdivision and conveyance of the air rights. I'm just wondering, in the resolve clause it asks for MOHCD to conduct the feasibility study. Why is it that we can't see the feasibility study first before we go ahead with the subdivision and conveyance?
I would defer that to, 15 years ago when I first started this, we actually got pro formas from folks in the development community that actually showed us, I think in 2002 or 2003, that a project was feasible at that time. The project we envisioned at that time had a percentage of on-site inclusionary housing, and we actually got developers to come in and prepare pro formas for us. So I think it is feasible, and I think we heard that from Ms. Hartley. I would like to start getting this thing moving. It's been 15 years. We're in a market environment where I think it could happen. To the extent that we authorize real estate to subdivide that air rights parcel, at least they have something to start working with and marketing, and we'll see how the market responds to it. I think the most important thing that we heard from, or that I've heard privately and now publicly from MOHCD, is the notion that perhaps the best bang for our buck would be to put it out for market rate and use the proceeds to catalyze an off-site affordable housing project. But we could defer to Ms. Hartley to see what her response is to that. And obviously it has to be feasible if the market's going to consume it.
Right. So, I think that just speaks to my point. I think it was less so for Ms. Hartley, but more so just in terms of process, right? I'd love to see, for example, the details ironed out about whether it be market rate housing on top or affordable, whatever it is, before we actually go through with the subdivision. That's my concern. And unfortunately, I haven't seen what was done 15 years ago. But of course, I'm very supportive of affordable housing and thinking very creatively around how it is that you produce it, especially in a district such as yours where, you don't have a whole lot of land to go and build affordable housing. So for me, again, it's more of the process. Like, can we see that information before we subdivide?
And Ms. Hartley, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. If not, what I would suggest, subject to public comment, is that if you give me a few minutes from me and my staff to work on massaging the resolves, perhaps we could say that it is our intent to authorize the Department of Real Estate to subdivide after the Mayor's Office of Housing conducts a feasibility study.
Okay. That would be something that I would feel more comfortable with, is that the actual action would occur after the feasibility analysis.
Ms. Hartley?
If I may, our very, very preliminary studies indicate that an affordable housing development on the site, because of the height limit, when you'd want to maximize the height, and because of the cost involved in relocating the fire station as well as building a new station, would make affordable housing there cost prohibitive. So what I would suggest is that we have the Department of Real Estate actually conduct the feasibility study in conjunction with their analysis of putting it out to bid in an RFP, because they're best situated to gauge the market response to this effort.
Quick question. I'm Ms. Hartley at our fire department. Is this parcel, is this station subject to any plans for seismic retrofit or upgrades at this point in time? No. Okay.
Supervisor Farrell, that not at this time. Station 13 is in pretty good shape.
Sound. Okay. Thanks very much. So why don't we open this up to public comment, and then we can kind of hold on to voting on this until later. So we'll open this up to public comment for item number 4. Anybody wish to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. So colleagues, what we'll do is we won't take action right now. We'll hold off and we'll allow staffs to work on some potential language here. And with that, Madam Clerk, we'll move on to the next one. Call item number 6, please. Or excuse me, item 5.
Item number 5 is an ordinance amending the housing code to prohibit the installation of timers or devices that restrict or interrupt the water flow in residential units and making appropriate findings.
Okay, sponsored by Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Peskin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendments before you to Section 505 of the Housing Code are the result of complaints that my office received from constituents at the Balmoral Hotel at 1010 Bush Street in District 3, a facility that I have been to, that shower timers were being installed in their shared shower spaces, effectively cutting off hot water flow after a brief period of time. In some of these older buildings with old pipes where it takes water a few minutes to get hot, this restricted the showers of senior and disabled tenants to only a few minutes. DBI, and I want to thank Rosemary Bosky and Bill Strawn, quickly responded and filed a notice of violation against the property owners, and we can hear more about this relative to that enforcement action from DBI. And the property owners appealed, and I'm happy to say the city ultimately prevailed. And even though our code was sufficient to address that particular circumstance, the instant amendment before us removes any lack of clarity about what is allowed or not allowed in the city's rental housing stock. I believe, and I think DBI and DBI's commission, which heard this matter, concur that this is a habitability issue and a health and safety issue for residential tenants in the city, and I respectfully ask for your support. And relative to water conservation, I just want to note that by exempting fixtures required by Chapters 12 and 12A of the Housing Code, this legislation has no impact on city or state water conservation regulations. Water conservation is best addressed through technology and shower heads that can regulate water pressure within reasonable bounds rather than just shutting off water completely. And to that end, I'd like to make one small amendment at the request of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission to create consistency with other code sections, and I will hand you that, which is at page 5, line 13, that says shower heads with no more than 2.5 gallons per minute flow shall be required, and I will hand those to you and Supervisor Tang. I specifically want to thank Lala Hill-Courtney and Gary Bossier for bringing this to my office's attention, and respectfully ask for your support.
Okay, Supervisor Peskin has made an amendment motion. We will hold off on acting on that until public comment is done. Any questions or comments at this time?
And we have Bill Strawn here from the Department of Building Inspection, and I want to thank the Building Inspection Commission who heard this matter and approved it unanimously.
Okay, thank you. DBI, do you want to make any comments?
Bill Strawn, DBI's Legislative and Public Affairs Manager. Yes, thank Supervisor very much for bringing this forward. Our commission did hear an appeal about this and made it very clear that removing these types of restrictions was in the public safety and public health best advantage. So we are wholeheartedly supportive of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Peskin, any other speakers before public comment?
I don't believe so, but we do have the two members of the public who brought this to my attention, and I want to thank them and previously acknowledge them.
Okay. Thank you. At this point, we'll open this up to public comment. Anybody wish to comment on item 5?
Hello, Supervisors. Thank you, Aaron Peskin, Supervisor Peskin, who has been with us from the very beginning of this process when a company called Structure took over our building, which is the Balmoral Residences, which was built in 1907. It's a historic building on Nob Hill. One day I woke up and went to take a shower, and I saw a timer on the wall. It said 7 minutes flashing off and on. I pushed the button, got into the shower, and a minute later a beep goes off. Then a beep goes off. At the end of 7 minutes, the shower turns off. I barely had the soap in my hair, the conditioner in my hand, and dripping wet. I didn't know what was going on. Walked out, took a look at the shower timer, and it said 5 minutes. I tried to push the button. The shower would not go back on. I spoke with management. Management said, well, we put the shower timers on because there's so many tenants in the building that we didn't want any trouble. We wanted everyone to be able to take a shower. Well, you have to wait 5 minutes before the water flow turns back on again. It was a huge problem, extremely stressful. It went on for about a year and a half. The management did nothing about it. To this date, the shower timers are still on the wall, even though the DBI on March 15th made a decision to take the timers off the wall. We have 6 shower timers still with the timers on the wall. They blink 12 minutes now. And I ask that you have them removed because no one should have to go through the experience of having to take a shower in 7 minutes. We have a lot of disabled, older people in our building besides the younger students, and even the younger students with the longer hairs will literally go to one shower and then go to the next shower. So,
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Jordan Davis again, wear a lot of hats. I'd like to thank Supervisor Peskin for this legislation restricting shower timers, and this was actually discussed at last month's SRO task force meeting in great detail. But I would like to speak as someone who has a bachelor's degree in environmental studies, which means I probably know a little more about water conservation than your average landlord. Indeed, there are plenty of ways to conserve water without having to interrupt people's shower, but we should not be balancing water conservation on the backs of tenants, especially since we have golf courses in the deserts of SoCal like absorbing a lot more water. Bathing is a human need, golf not so much. Furthermore, there are some people who cite that certain demographics have a tendency to flood their bathrooms. This is completely false and is based on negative stereotypes of poor people. Plus, there are already laws in the books to deal with such behaviors. Also, this is a senior and disability issue as well. If you consider mobility issues and sensory issues relating to water temperature, which often is a problem in older buildings. Finally, let the record show that I had to shower for about 7 to 10 minutes today, far more than these timers allow, due to special hair care needs, and so I can look twice as good to be taken half as seriously in a cis-sexist society, and it's a big problem for us. Please pass this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Teresa Flander from Senior and Disability Action. I'm here just to support this and to thank you, Supervisor Peskin, for doing this today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony Robles, Senior and Disability Action. I want to thank Supervisor Peskin for introducing this ordinance that would amend the housing code. Many of the seniors and folks with disabilities that we work with have varying degrees of mobility problems or issues, and sometimes just getting into the shower can be a task. So again, it might seem like a small indignity, but it's actually not. It's actually a big thing, because you need to take a shower. You need to feel good about yourself. That when you take a shower, you feel good about yourself, and it's something that's needed. And I thank you, Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this item? Please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Lala Hill Courtney, and I live at 1010 Bush Street. And this is the focus of these timers. And I can tell you that they have timers still in the building. They have not followed the decision by the government. The timers are still up. And in the whole period that I've lived there, they had it set for 7 minutes. Took 1 minute to get the water hot enough to go into the shower. So you could never have anything longer than a 5-minute shower after you had the 1 minute of cold water becoming hot water. And it was brought up by the owner, Lawrence Chan. He said, well, this is costing me a lot of money in the water cost. And I looked at him like, that's a really bad statement. People are paying to live here, and you're going to restrict the water flow for us to have clean hair, clean bodies, and to be able to walk around and enjoy having a clean body. And I think when the money comes, that it's being reduced from his pocket because he has got to pay for more money for the water in that building.
Thank you, Lala.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak or comment on item number 5? Seeing none, public comment is closed.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to adopt that amendment. I just also want to add that it's unfortunate that we have to introduce and pass pieces of legislation like this because of one actor's bad behavior, but that's why our codes grow larger and larger because of just abject, bad, inhumane behavior. And with that, I'd like to pass the amendment and send this to the full board as amended with recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Peskin. Thank you for coming and for letting everyone know about this legislation and what's happening here. So fully supportive, and so we can take that motion without objection. Madam Clerk, would you call item number 6, please?
Item number 6 is an ordinance amending the administrative code to require a landlord seeking to recover possession of an owner move-in or relative move-in to provide a declaration of occupancy and file annual documentation for 3 years.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So, colleagues, a number of months ago, I think, like most people here, was outraged to learn from news reports that 1 out of 4 owner move-in evictions were seemingly fraudulent here in the city of San Francisco. I do support the rights of property owners to buy property and move into the unit that they own. And most of the owners participating in owner move-in evictions, or OMI evictions as they're called, are small property owners following the law and looking to live in these units or have family members live in them. But if they evict someone as part of an OMI eviction, they should absolutely be living in that unit and following the letter of the eviction laws here in our city. Furthermore, the unit where the eviction took place should not be re-rented to a new tenant at a higher rate. That's already against the law. We know that over the past 4 years, more than 8,000 people have been evicted from their homes in San Francisco using OMI evictions. And OMI evictions, just 8,000 generally. OMI evictions have spiked more than 200% over the last 5 years, which represents approximately 1,500 OMI evictions since 2013. I think we all share the belief that we should do everything in our power to stem the tide of wrongful evictions in our city and give tenants a fighting chance to stay here in San Francisco. So in terms of the policy, an NBC News investigative team report found that the random sampling of OMI evictions the Rent Board saw and sent to the district attorney for investigations annually, none are investigated or prosecuted. After much discussion with the DA's office, we learned that fraudulent OMI evictions are extremely difficult to prosecute due to a California Supreme Court ruling that eviction notices are subject to litigation privilege. The court held that landlords are immune from liability when they file eviction lawsuits against tenants, even if there's no basis for the eviction. To come at this issue from another way, I aim to develop a policy that requires owners pursuing owner move-in evictions to follow new reporting and transparency requirements in order to deter bad actors from following through with an unlawful eviction. First, our policy mandates that owners must sign a declaration under penalty of perjury that they will follow all of the existing eviction rules and law, and specifically that they intend to occupy the unit or have a designated family member occupy the unit. The declaration will be filed publicly with the Rent Board along with the notice to vacate the property. Second, our policy mandates that owners must provide an annual statement of occupancy to prove that they or their family member is indeed living in the unit and following all eviction laws. Owners will have to first report this information within 3 months of the eviction and every year that they are required to be occupying the unit. This statement will also have to be signed under penalty of perjury. Landlords will be required to file at least 2 forms of documentation proving that they or their designated relative are occupying the unit. These documents can include, but aren't limited to, utility bills from the past 45 days, automobile registration and insurance, current HOA or renter's insurance policies, government correspondence received within the last 45 days, voter registration, a driver's license, or homeowner's tax exemption. And again, these reporting requirements will be reported publicly through the rent board to provide tenants an additional tool for recourse against an owner who may have wrongfully evicted them. Third, our policy creates a rebuttable presumption that the landlord did not perform the OMI in good faith if a landlord doesn't comply with these rules. These presumptions allow the court to determine whether the landlord has met the requirements in good faith. Together, I believe these provisions will disincentivize bad actors from pursuing OMI evictions. Owners who actually intend to occupy the unit as their primary place of residence will be the only ones engaging in OMI evictions. Owners can also violate the OMI laws by re-renting the unit to a new tenant at a higher market rent. New tenants would have no way of knowing what the rent should be. To address this issue, the ordinance requires a statement of occupancy to disclose the current rent of the unit. And the rent board would be required to send the original occupant and the new unit occupant the statement of occupancy. This represents a suggestion put forth from my colleagues. Finally, the ordinance will extend the statute of limitations for wrongful eviction actions from 1 year to 3 years, a change that I know our tenants unions advocated for. It's a common sense change because landlords who enact an OMI have to occupy a unit for 3 years. The statute of limitations should also be 3 years. And I wanted to strengthen the statute of limitations language today, making sure that it is 3 years following a violation of the ordinance. So in conjunction with Deputy City Attorney John Givner, I'm going to read a proposed amendment into the record here that will do exactly that. On page 4, line 25, add the language that says, if the landlord has recovered possession pursuant to section 37.9A8, such action shall be brought no later than 3 years after the date the landlord files the first statement of occupancy with the rent board under section 37.9A8, Romanet 7, or 3 months after the landlord recovers possession, whichever is earlier. And we can act on that after public comment. Ultimately, given what we've all learned over the past few months, I think the ordinance in front of us is a measured one, but will have the desired effect. My office has engaged with our district attorney, the rent board, property owners, and the tenants union to make suggestions and amendments, and I appreciate everyone's inputs. Not everything is incorporated, but I believe the right ones are into this policy. I strongly believe the ordinance will discourage property owners from engaging in wrongful owner move-in evictions, which is exactly what we're trying to prevent. We want to allow property owners that are abiding by the law to do so and to be able to continue to do so, but to stem the tide of fraudulent owner move-in evictions before they even happen. We want to deter this bad behavior because, as we know, people that get caught after the act, at the end of the day, these evictions happen, people are already moved out, and the damage has been done. So, colleagues, I'd ask for your support of the ordinance today. Unless you have any comments or questions, I will open this up to public comment.
I'm happy to hear public comment.
Sure.
I have a number of comments.
Okay. Anybody wish to comment on item number 6?
Jordan Davis for like a third time. I just want to say that even though like SRO tenants like myself are not really subject to OMI evictions, we're still watching this because oftentimes what happens is when people get evicted, they can't afford anywhere else but SROs, and that means that low-income people are going to be competing with a little less low-income people for valuable units. And I just want to say that we need to have this as strict as legally possible because this bad behavior has to stop, and we need to, this will help clamp down on the housing crisis as much as we legally can. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Next speaker, please.
Teresa Flandrick, also of North Beach Tenants Committee, as well as SDA. because I know that many seniors are the first to be evicted, especially if they happen to be in a top unit of a 2-unit building and an owner move-in. I support, of course, any relative moving into that building, if they're there, to be there to actually live there and to look after family members, etc. So I like that this is going after the bad actors, certainly extending it to the 3-year period that they are lawfully to be living in that unit. Again, it is the bad actors, and I think this goes quite a bit to address that, and I appreciate that. I would like to see more, but on this, I want to say that I support what you have included here, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Charlie Goss. I work on government affairs at the Apartment Association. We also would like to voice our support for the ordinance. We believe that it strikes the right balance towards, addressing potentially fraudulent owner move-in evictions. We don't have an interest in protecting fraudulent owner move-in evictions. We want to thank Supervisor Farrell for the outreach that your office and staff has done, particularly Kanishka. And again, we believe this strikes the right balance. We think that extending the statute of limitations for 3 years is appropriate and makes sense given the 3-year residency requirement. That's more or less it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, supervisors. My name is Tony Robles. I'm with Senior and Disability Action. Much appreciation on the extending the statute of limitations from 1 to 3 years. The NBC report, I know, shed a lot of light, brought this to the wider public consciousness, but it was something that housing advocates like myself knew for a very long time was going on. Seniors were and folks with disabilities were getting hit especially hard. I think this goes in the right direction. I know that there's a lot of details in it, but I just want to express my thanks for putting this on the agenda and making this a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Supervisors. Janine New, San Francisco Apartment Association. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. My colleague Charlie already spoke. There's one thing, there are a lot of amendments that have been floated around here because there's a piece of legislation that Supervisor Peskin's office has, a piece of legislation Supervisor Farrell's office had. We had a meeting with the tenants union. We came to some agreements together. Some of those amendments are floating out there, so I'm not really sure what this final version of legislation says today, so I'd like to see it before I offer my approval to Supervisor Farrell's legislation. One concern I still have, because the devil is in the details, of course, this stuff is very complicated. There's an amendment floating out about a third-party right of action, third-party right to sue, and we definitely do not support that. We don't support more litigation. If it's a landlord-tenant situation, that's fine, but we don't agree with other third-party legal groups or neighbors or whatever getting involved in something that is this tightly wound. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And quickly to address that question, that was a policy difference we could have included, but that we did not include the third-party right of action here. With that, anybody else wish to comment on item 6? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Chair Farrell, and let me concur that this is definitely a step in the right direction. This is something that anecdotally we've all heard about for years, and it wasn't until we all saw the extensive research that NBC Bay Area did that it confirmed all of the anecdotal horror stories that we had heard, and 25% is a remarkably high number. Having said that, and let me also say, I think we're all coming from a very similar policy perspective. I, too, believe that property owners should have the ability to occupy a unit that they own with their parents or their children, and that we do not want to see abuse of that system, as we have seen both anecdotally and now supported by extensive research. Having said that, and acknowledging that there are two different versions out there, I think the fundamental issue here has been an issue of enforcement. and it has been unfortunately impossible for the district attorney to enforce because apparently there was a court decision that invalidated some of the Chapter 37 provisions around owner move-in evictions, and so it's been abused. The other legislative version that Supervisor Kim and I introduced, I think, goes a long way to dealing with the enforcement parts of it. We were all working on it at the same time, having all seen it, seen the press around it at the same time. And ours, I think, was introduced a week after yours. What I would like to do, if you are willing, Mr. Chairman and Supervisor Tang, is to try to conform the two pieces of legislation. This is not an issue relative to ownership. I'm happy for it to be, for the chief sponsor to be Supervisor Farrell. But I would like at least the opportunity to see if there are portions of the other legislation that can or should be incorporated in this legislation. Because of the week difference, it was still under the 30-day rule, but can be heard next week. And maybe we can work over the intervening week with the tenants union, who is not here today, and the apartment association to see if we can lift some of those provisions. I hear that there is definitely antipathy towards a third-party right of action, but there were other provisions relative to enforceability that were not related to a third-party right of action that are in the other version of legislation, which I would like to try to incorporate into Supervisor Farrell's legislation if possible.
To Supervisor Peskin, always happy to do that. I think that's the better course of action here. If we can join them, I would say a few things, though. I think one of the principal differences is creating a new misdemeanor penalty here between the two pieces of legislation. I would just flag that if that is something that is part of the equation for the other piece of legislation, I don't think that's something that I would ever agree to, and so I'm happy to do it, but I want to make sure that that's not kind of the main sticking point, because otherwise at that point we could move forward. But again, I'm always happy to collaborate, and think if we can pull that together, that would be a better course.
Yeah, I think there are a number of provisions that are actually not third-party rights of action, or what I would actually call, relative to what you just referenced, which is really replacing the outdated and apparently unenforceable misdemeanor provision that is in the existing code with an enforceable misdemeanor provision. But there are a number of other enforceable or enforceability issues that I think may be worth considering and melding into your legislation.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we do that? Let's attempt to do that over the course of the next week, if amenable. Then if that being the case, what I would suggest then, why don't you reread the amendment into the record that I identified earlier. I think we had a small tweak to it from Deputy City Attorney John Giver, and then we can continue this item until the next Land Use Committee meeting. So then, colleagues, the amendment would read, again, page 4, line 25. If the landlord has recovered possession pursuant to Section 37.9A8, such action shall be brought no later than 3 years after A, the date the landlord files the first statement of occupancy with the rent board under Section 37.9A8, Roman numeral 7, or B, 3 months after the landlord recovers possession, whichever is earlier. So, colleagues, and Supervisor Peskin, appreciate that thought process. Look forward to hopefully working together to get one piece of legislation out of here. With that, colleagues, I'd appreciate a motion to accept the amendments and then continue this item as amended till our next Land Use Committee meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Peskin. We can take that without objection. Okay, Madam Clerk, where are we? Would you call item number 7,
Chair,
please?
just to clarify, we continue that to June 12th? This item number 6? Yes.
Correct.
Yes, okay. Next item, item number 7, is an ordinance amending the police code to require employers to provide a specific process by which an employee can request accommodation for lactation breaks and spaces and making appropriate findings.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, our Supervisor Tang, one of our colleagues, introduced this item, so we'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. We had the bulk of the conversation in our last Land Use Committee meeting, so I'm not going to re-harp on this one. But basically, this, just as a recap, does three main things. One is that it requires private employers to have a policy regarding lactation accommodations and to provide that to all new employees as well as employees requesting parental leave. Secondly, requires higher standards for lactation accommodations, given that state and federal law are incredibly vague when it comes to what is actually required. And then lastly, requires that significant tenant improvement projects would also need to provide for lactation accommodations. So those are the 3 points in a nutshell, and I just want to again thank very much Ashley Summers from my office, who worked so hard on this legislation and experienced all of this firsthand herself, Brad from our city attorney's office, Preeti Rane, Gracie, Dr. Curtis Chan from DPH, Julia Parrish from our legal aid at work, Dee Dee Workman, and members of the Chamber of Commerce, and BOMA members who provided a lot of feedback about how this would be feasible in all different types and shapes of buildings, and of course DBI. So with that, colleagues, we had adopted our amendments last week, which triggered the hearing today, but happy to forward this on after public comment to our full board.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Tang. If no questions or comments, we'll open this up to public comment. Anybody wish to comment on item 7? There are only 6 people in chambers. Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed.
All right, so I'll make a motion then to send this forward to the full board with positive recommendation.
Motion by Supervisor Tang. We can take that without objection. Madam Clerk, would you call item number 8, please?
Item number 8 is an ordinance amending the planning code to revise the amount of the inclusionary affordable housing fee and the on-site and off-site affordable housing alternatives, require minimum dwelling unit mixes, and making appropriate findings.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So, colleagues, this item will have to be continued for 1 week, in particular due to some noticing requirements. So we'll entertain that motion after public comment. So with that, we'll open item number 8 up to public comment. Anybody wish to comment on that item? Yes, we do.
I'm just wondering, I know that the housing balance report just came out, although it should have been out in April. Wondering if that is going to impact inclusionary housing in terms of thinking, planning. Just wish it had come out earlier, and just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to comment on item number 8? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Supervisor Peskin. Continue.
Let's continue this item for 1 week.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Peskin. We can take that without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I am awaiting a revised item number 4, which is apparently on its way. If you would like to recess for just a few moments.
I would say we will go into recess for a few minutes.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
Okay, welcome back from recess for our regularly scheduled Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting for Monday, June 5th, 2017. Whoops. We've gone dark. At least CCTV. At least the captioning picked up. There we go. Okay. Again, welcome back from recess for our regularly scheduled Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting for Monday, June 5th, 2017. We have acted on all items except for item number 4 on our agenda. And this is an item sponsored by Supervisor Peskin. We'll be considering some amendments that he is proposing. Supervisor Peskin, we'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Chair Farrell, and thank you to the committee for your patience, and thank you to my staff for hopefully incorporating the comments that we heard from Supervisor Tang and from the Mayor's Office of Housing and our Department of Real Estate. Before you are a number of amendments to the subject resolution, which speak to the possibility of using revenue generated by the sale of the air rights parcel to fund 100% affordable housing at another location, such as the site that was identified by the Mayor's Office of Housing at 772 Pacific Avenue, and further resolving that a feasibility study be conducted prior to moving forward with a subdivision of the air rights parcel.
Okay. Any question, colleagues, from Supervisor Peskin on these amendments? If not, was that a motion, Supervisor Peskin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we can take that motion to amend and then add to that motion, per Supervisor Peskin's allowance, a furtherance of that motion to pass the underlying item as amended out.
So moved.
We can take that then without objection. No comments or questions. Thank you. Madam Clerk, any other business in front of us?
That concludes our business for today.
Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.